if they try and say there's no money for ferries, they just found $600 million today for Pharmac from future budgets. So that's how they've found the money for this, from future budgets. So if they say we can't afford it, but all of a sudden you can find, I mean, look, this is a great story about drugs being funded, yeah? Medications being funded. But I don't want to skip past this idea of how the government was forced to reach into next year's budget to get money for something they're doing today. Let's have a look at the story. And this is a good news story. But the way this government, you know, like they talk about Trump, yeah? They talk about, wasn't Trump's years amazing when it came to illegal immigration? The border was never safer, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, that's because the world closed down thanks to COVID and people weren't leaving to come across the border. Now, that means he actually fell into a quote unquote good statistic, but he did it without any effort, almost, you know, without him being there, those things would have happened. Excuse me for a second, I've got to call the dog. Sorry, just getting the dog back. She's going for a wander. Get on your mat. So it was actually had nothing to do with Trump, the numbers. My sense for this is almost got nothing to do with national for this good news story, other than they stumbled and bumbled their way into it because they said something stupid before the election that they've pushed hard to fulfill. I'll give you more at the end. Have a listen.
Tēnā tātou katoa, good evening. Kiwis.
Good story overall.
Life-saving drugs are celebrating tonight after the government announced a monster funding boost for medicine buying agency Pharmac. It'll get an extra $604 million
Amazing.
over the next 4 years.
150 more million a year.
54 new drugs and help 175,000 patients in the next 12 months. Now, National had specified 13 new cancer drugs that it wanted funded. Under this package, only 7 of those will be funded, but the remainder will be replaced by alternative drugs that are either as good or better.
So even that's good. Like, we criticised them last week because fucking Reti was going on about we're going to have exactly the same drugs as we listed. We're going to have exactly the same drugs. The ones we said we're going to have. And the medical institution were going, there's better drugs than those now. So even that's good. So they've done the right thing by fulfilling the drugs which are the best for people out of that list and getting better ones. It's a good story. It's good for patients. It's good for some cancer sufferers. It's good. This is a good day for New Zealand, for the New Zealand health system.
There will also be an extra 13 cancer drugs funded, along with a further 28 drugs for other conditions. It's a response to an outcry from patients after the promised drugs weren't funded in the budget. Political editor Jenna Lynch has the details.
Patients like Vicky Hudson-Craig were hanging off every word of the Prime Minister today.
So today we are very proud to be making a health announcement.
As the government announced it would pour $600 million into Pharmac to fulfil its cancer drug promise.
We are delivering on our promise to support Kiwis fighting cancer.
Vicky has stage 4 melanoma. The treatment she's on is unfunded and one of the 13 promised by National on the election campaign. She's currently paying more than $5,000 a month for it herself. Her drug wasn't among those named today.
Really pleased for Pharmac and for New Zealand in general, but on a personal level, a little confused and uncertain still.
We could have done things and communicated things a little bit better, but I just say to you, this is a substantive, significant, over-the-top investment that we're making here that I think will absolutely transform many Kiwis' lives.
It's, you know, yeah, it's life or death that I need to be on that drug, and they appealed to people like me, friends and family of mine, people that we know that voted purely because of this policy.
The promise was...
Can I just say, this is not in defence of the national government. I don't quite understand that part of the story, because the 13 drugs that they said they were going to get have been funded or alternatives for it. Yet the person in the story just there was saying she was voting for this government for those drugs, but it seems that the drug that she needs wasn't in that list either. I guess what she's saying is because there was a focus on cancer, but just to be accurate, what I hear, Cherie, tell me if you hear it differently, but what I hear her saying, her drug's not on there, at the same time as the government saying all of those drugs, or better ones, have been funded, which means her drug was probably never on there anyway. She was probably just hopeful that other ones would be. Is that a fair, like, at least observation right now?
That's my read on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Just to make it clear, and this is not to, this is not to support what's going on right now, but just to be as accurate as we can.
Was a glaring omission from this year's budget, and ministers have been scrambling behind the scenes to come up with a fix to the quite complex policy problem. Because Pharmac's independent from politicians, the government cannot specify which treatments it should fund. Pharmac has a wait list of drugs it wants to fund. It's ranked, but the rankings are secret for commercial reasons. So to fund the specific drugs the government wants to, it needed to give Pharmac enough money to fund all the drugs ranked ahead of the 13 promised.
Right. Did you get that? We can't skip over that. So imagine that there's 30 drugs and the drugs they're named are number 4, 7, 9, 15, 18. That means to make sure their election promise was fulfilled, Chewy, they had to fund enough to get right the way down to 18. So all these other drugs have just been caught up in their blunder about announcing what they were going to do before the election to get these cancer drugs funded. So that's why I'm saying they've blundered into this. This is not good governance. This is great for New Zealand. It is not good governance. It is not good politics. They've gone, well, hang on, for me to get down to number 22, because that's the last one we said, it's currently number 22, we have to fund all of those to make sure it happens, because they're not allowed to say only fund 1, 7, 9, 15, 22. They can't do that. So the only way they can get to number 22, arbitrary figure, is to fund all of them. So they've fucking fallen into this, Chewy, by giving New Zealand a really good outcome or really good result when it comes to the health system, because they were such terrible electioneers and made such a balls up about this before the election. Yours.
Yeah. As I said, this is a great result for people that need those drugs. It's a great result for Pharmac to have extra funding. It's absolutely not because of good governing.
No.
It's not because of good process. It's not because of good decision making. It is because they fucked up bad and they got absolutely lashed by the public and the media and they panicked.
Yeah.
It would have been great. Like, what would we be saying if these guys came in and said, hey, look, we've identified this clear lack of what Pharmac needs to bring in. This is what we've campaigned on. We have the funds in the budget because we're sensible. No, they flubbed it at every fucking step of the way. And now they're just panicked and they're like, oh, we're trying to spin this into a good thing. It is a good thing, but not because of you.
Yeah, no, and like Mike says there on the message, it's 56 drugs. I'm picking out. So that probably means one of those 13 drugs they named was probably number 56. So that's from, so to make sure all of those drugs or their equivalent got funded, they had to go all the way to number 56, which is great. Like, honestly, it's a really good news story. And I'm not trying to be a partisan hack here, but it's with no thanks to National. It's really not, because they were forced to. And there's lots of other people here saying in the chat at the moment, let's put a few of them up, saying about this, shows how desperate they are just because of the polls. Steph says too little too late. I'll say this, right? I was thinking about this today. Funny enough, Chewy, I was thinking about this based on that conversation we had last week about if there's a conspiracy theorist in your family. Like, when a conspiracy theorist comes to the light, even if they've been a prick for the last 10 years, there's a celebration that they've come to the light. Like, honestly, I think being gracious and going, awesome, you've seen the light, let's walk forward now. This feels a bit like that. These guys have provided, guys and girls, this government has provided something that they didn't want to do before the election. They probably still don't want to do now, because they know the mountain of criticism that's going to come to how they're handling it. But all of that aside, we've got these drugs now through Pharmac. I mean, that's all that really matters. So I understand what you're saying, Steph, too little too late. I don't know if I entirely agree, because all I can think of in the U-turn of the century, says Rod Tang, is that those medications are now part of the Pharmac system. Fucking awesome. You know what I'm saying? But I think people are right. It is smacks of desperation.
It's funny how much money can just be fucking magicked up when they really step on themselves.
Yeah. Well, should we get to that?
Yes, we should.
Let's get to that.
Secret for commercial reasons. So to fund the specific drugs the government wants to, it needed to give Pharmac enough money to fund all the drugs ranked ahead of the 13 promised.
Finally, we start to bridge the gap between New Zealand and the countries we like to
this is the thing I hate. These fuckers, man. They're selling it off like, yes, we've finally done the right thing. We're up there. It's like, you have to. You've had to. You've been caught with your hand in the cookie jar, as my mum used to say, and you've had to, or else you wouldn't be able to live this thing down. I tell you what, I'd love to see what their internal polling is around cancer drugs up until this point. I guarantee you that would have driven a bunch of this money being found.
Compare ourselves with in terms of medicine funding. This uplift is enormous.
Blood cancers like leukemia were excluded from National's initial promise, and treatment for those will now be covered by the additional 13. The other 28 drugs cover conditions like infections, osteoporosis, sexual health, mental health, dermatology, and respiratory and inflammatory conditions. Malcolm Mulholland has been campaigning for better access to drugs for 5 years.
There are a lot of faces of patients, both those who are no longer with us and those who are waiting for those drugs to be funded, that I can visualise right now. It's a very emotional time. This is great news.
Great news for a lot of patients, but there's inevitably those who will miss out. Maggie Ngatai has advanced breast cancer.
There is no mention of the drug that I need. They did just mention breast cancer. The energy that it takes to deal with the financing side takes away from the healing side.
7 of the 13 medicines National promised are on Pharmac's waitlist, so could be funded quickly, with the first available from October or November. However, the others need more clinical advice, or Pharmac hasn't received applications for them. That's where Vicky's drug sits. For those ones, the government has pledged to fund an equal or better alternative.
I can't give a commitment as to when those 6 might be able to come forward, but we do know that we'll start deploying the whole package October, November.
Anyone that's living with cancer knows that time is critical, and that you don't know how long you've got, and you don't know how long the drugs will work. So yesterday was too long, really.
But the wait continues.
So there you go. That's the story, Chu. And as I said, overall, it's a really good story. It's not, and look, the next election, right, National will run on this. They will run on what they've done with Pharmac. And what is that saying? Let baby have their ball, whatever it is. Because of them, we've got these. But as I said, it's almost like they've fallen into it with no knowledge of what they're doing. Just quickly though, on the funding for it, Clint Smith, old friend of the show, Clint Smith, was on Twitter tonight, and he says this: "It was weird to hear Luxon say, quote, isn't it amazing we found the money to deliver this extra funding," end quote. No, you just took money from next year's unallocated budget allowance. There's no magic there. It just means less money available for other health, education, etc. next year. New Zealand Taxpayers Union, the government announced an additional funding for Pharmac is welcome, but it's a welcome one, but the government must set out where that money is coming from. We can't afford to load up more and more debt, so future taxpayers end up spending more on paying interest costs and less on life-saving medicines. So you've lost the Taxpayers Union as well, and Clint points out where the money's coming from, next year's budget. Again, headline, fantastic that there's 56 new drugs being funded. Subheader, no thanks to National. Kind of almost exactly that.
Yeah, it's really comforting to know that our current government's approach to health funding is basically a pyramid scheme that they are in with themselves. How long do you think it will take for people to realize that these guys are incompetent? Is it like, I mean, I know we started joking about one-term government, but I see more and more chat about that every day.
Yeah, I mean, I still go by the stats and say how unlikely that is, but
it's super unlikely. But
yeah,
it needs to happen. It's just this shower of shit. If these guys, if our media keeps on fumbling this, and they lose that thread of showing how consistently shithouse these guys are,
yep,
they need to keep on tugging that until the whole thing unravels. What I am worried about them is them front loading all of this incompetence, all of these lies, all of this nasty stuff, so they can go into an election run with just a series of sugar hits and good news.
Well,
You know, crashing the economy in the hope that we get a bounce in 2 years' time to make everybody feel good about National again is just so gloriously cynical.
Yeah. Hey, look, a couple of things. I mean, as you're talking about one-term government, you know, as Simon says very succinctly, I'm guessing Pharmac will have a fiscal cliff in 2028. Yeah, it's exactly what they're calling fiscal cliffs. But completely just, you know, beside the point, and I only saw this on Calvin's feed today, people who voted for Winston aren't all that happy.
Winston Peters, what an absolute disappointment he has been.
What a damn squib he was, wasn't he?
For the freedom
we had such high hopes for him, but...
He promised everything, and I will listen, and I will talk to the freedom movement. He came to the Freedom Village, and all he was doing was using every single one of us to get back into power and then do nothing. And he's basically
you're amazed. It's, I mean, like, but what I'm saying is one-term government. There you go. There's a voting bloc that's not going back to New Zealand first. So who knows? Who knows?
I love Liz Gunn talking about fucking voting for Winston Peters. Didn't you have your own political party that was going to get like 1 million votes or something like that?
I don't know if she was voting for Winston Peters, but you know, this idea, yeah. Hey, I think we're going to keep trucking unless there's anything desperate you want, because there's a bunch of super chats we should get to, and then we've got an interview with Timothy Paul coming up as well.
I'm just before we completely leave the ferry on the shore there. Someone's just flicked through a Herald article, and it's archived, so it looks like garbage. But members of the Ministerial Advisory Group looking at the future of Kiwi Rail's Cook Strait ferry service have been paid more than $80,000 over the last 2 months.
Yeah,
investigating what we do from here on in. There is talk of the sunk cost of getting out of this contract with Hyundai being $800 million. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade warned that cancelling the contract would damage our relationship with Korea.
Look, I laughed there, and when I put out that tweet on Friday, which was like, bah, a bunch of people were like, oh, look at how much the left celebrates whilst New Zealand burns. And I was just like, yeah, who set the fucking fire to the place? Who's put the kindling on there? Who's lighting it and making it burn? I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's like, it's shock, it's disbelief. It's like, we've said this for the last month. We told you, we warned you. We stood on top of the thing with our flags, and we did semaphore, and we said, warning, warning, you know, crash coming. And all what we said and more is happening. So I laugh because it's probably disgust. It's like, well, what else can you do? If you don't laugh, you're going to cry, Joey.
Like we've had transitions between a left and a right government before, and it hasn't, to my memory at least, been this brutal.
Yeah,
like the cuts are brutal, the change is brutal, the cancellation of projects and this sort of thing has been brutal in a way that I don't recall ever being the case. And it doesn't strike me as a party that has the country in its best interests.
Yeah, fair.